A Handy Escape by me. He thinks the year was 1849 or 1850. He couldn't know for sure. He didn't even know his own name. They didn't either. They just called him Handy. He was about 12 or 13, maybe 14. He had no way to tell when he was farming on the potato plantation. At this point, Handy knew that he was in Virginia, although he didn't know what that meant. He was a slave, and he wasn't supposed to know that. He wasn't supposed to be able to think about that. He wasn't supposed to think that he had a choice, whether to be whipped for not harvesting enough potatoes or to be free. But Handy did, and it's all because of Mr. Duckstein. Howard Duckstein was his name. Handy knew that, but he and everyone else in the plantation called him the Duck. Howard was like a ninja who was everywhere all at once. No matter where you were on the farm or what you were doing, he would be there if you did something that could cause disorder. They would try everything to stop you from thinking. They took Handy from his mother and stopped her from teaching him anything. So much as a glance at another slave suggests an uprising to them, and that means you're going to get whipped. You don't work hard enough, you're going to get whipped. No matter how good of a slave you were, if there is such thing as a good slave, they'll find a reason to whip you. He'll find a way to stop you from thinking. But it wasn't enough to stop Handy. Handy was as mischievous as he could be as a slave. The overseers were pretty lousy, except for Duck. That's the only reason he had for his actions. Curiosity. He was farming potatoes like any other day when he heard some chatter from the front of the master's cabin, the place he couldn't see. It sounded like the Duck, which meant that he wasn't spying on him. Impulsively, Handy decided to drop his shovel and run over to the side of the cabin, around the corner of where he heard talking. The first voice he heard wasn't a familiar one. They're saying that there was a protest in Rochester asking to free the slaves and to give them equal rights. They're calling them abolitionists. The beast of a man, Duck, then spoke. Equal rights for black people and white people? Like that's ever gonna happen? The sound of deep laughter filled the air. Abolitionists? Equal rights for black and white people? What does this mean? Handy thought. From that moment on, he wanted answers. When the sun set and all the slaves were laying on the wooden floor in the cabin, he waited. Then he waited some more. He waited for the perfect moment. Then that moment came. Handy slowly rose up in the darkness of the night, then took each step carefully, not to make too much noise. He walked out the front door, then sprinted towards the cabin that he knew she was in, and then peered through a crack between the walls. His mother was in there, and he needed to ask her something. Handy tapped on the wall to wake her up, and slowly he saw movement in the shadows. Handy? He heard her say. What are you doing here? It's not safe. Handy answered. I heard the Dog talking about people who wanted to set us free. They're calling them abolitionists? His mother sighed. Yes, and they're coming here. A former slave woman, her name's Harriet Tubman. She's been here, and she's coming back. She's here to save us. What? No way, we're gonna be free, Handy yelled through the tiny hole. Hush, child, you cannot be loud, his mother instructed him. We'll be found. There were footsteps from the bushes behind them. There was scuffling in the leaves. Someone was there. Handy slowly turned around as if someone had a knife to his neck. I heard y'all were talking about me, a heavily accented female voice said. A head with a bandana, as if she was an outlaw, came through the bushes. Sorry, you probably don't recognize me, she said as her dark skin fell below the moonlight. My name's Harriet Tubman, and I'm here to save you and bring you to Canada. A smug face looked at Handy. No way, he said like a child. You're Harriet Tubman? Handy, shut up. We're gonna get caught, his mom said. What was that? They heard an American voice say. I don't know. Let's go check it out. Handy looked at his mother and then at Harriet. Now or never, Handy, Harriet said softly. You have to come with me to the carriage, or we can get you to the station. But my mother, he explained to her. There's no time, Handy. You have to go with her, Mom said, like she was one of the slave owners herself. Yes, there's little time to save her, but there's no way I'm just going to leave her here while we escape, Handy thought. "No," he told Harriet. "I'm not leaving without her." As if his life was on the line, which it was, he sprinted around the cabin into the moonlight. "Is that one of those slaves over there?" someone said, pointing in his direction. It was the duck. And he ran to the cabin while they were saying something, and there were footsteps coming closer, but still he found his mother with a frantic look by the wall. He took her by the hand and dragged her as well as he could to the door as her legs moved as fast as they could to keep up. But as he were nearing the door, he met them there. "What do you two think you're doing at this hour?" the duck stated. Handy and his mother looked at him, thinking of a way out, but neither of them said anything. The duck sighed. "Okay, then." Duck retrieved something from behind him, and his hand was a whip, the same one he always used. Handy had to think of a way out. His mother began to cry. A loose plank of wood creaked at the anxiousness. There was scuffling through the window. Handy realized something. He grabbed the loose plank of wood and pulled it with all his strength. "What are you doing?" the other guy said. But Handy was already throwing the wood through the glass window. It shattered as he saw Harriet on the other side, and he dove through the broken glass onto the ground outside. "Handy?" He heard his mother yell his name. "Ha ha!" He laughed in triumph. She was still in the cabin as Handy was getting up from the grass. Her arm was reaching through the window as Duck and the other guy were pulling her back. Without thinking, Handy grabbed her wrist and started pulling it with all his might to keep her by the wall. "Harriet, do something," he said as his voice was strained from the pulling. "I got this, Handy," she replied. "Ch-ch!" He let go of his mother and then snapped his head around. Harriet was blindly pointing her Colt pistol through the window. "Handy, get down!" Handy dove into the ground when, bang, the gun fired into the cabin. His mom was getting her head through the window as I heard some yelling from Duck in shock. "What the? A gun?" Handy grabbed a hold of his mom's wrist and pulled her out of the cabin. She dropped and rolled over on the floor like an armadillo, and then they ran into the darkness of the forest and the cover of the trees as they heard the muffled yells from their masters in freedom. Philadelphia, 1866. Handy was going for a walk when he decided to check his mailbox. His mother was inside the cabin making dinner for him, and he decided to take some time outside. There was a carriage and some horses in the stable. That's the same carriage he took when he was escaping from Virginia with his mother. He used to use it a lot, but he doesn't need it anymore. He can walk with his own legs now. He crossed the street and opened up the mailbox on the other side. Inside was an envelope. Inside of that was a letter. He opened it up and it said nothing, except ink marks covering words up. There was also a $100 bill inside. This envelope was some sort of reprimandation from someone, an apology or piece of condolence. And he thought for a moment. He didn't need it. And he put the letter with the money back into the envelope and back into the mailbox and walked away as if he had never seen anything.